it's
Lauren Daisy.
Welcome back to my channel. So today is the third installment in my ranking Pretty Little Liars love interests series, and today we're going to be talking about Emily Fields. So we're gonna get straight into it. We're gonna start with number 10. So at number 10, I think it's a pretty obvious one. We have Emily and Landon / Nate. So I had to include him because they did kiss, and you know, kind of had a weird sort of thing going. It was obviously, for Emily, kind of rooted in grief of Maya. We meet Landon in season 3, I believe, and he is claiming to be Maya's cousin. He and Emily kind of bond over their loss of Maya, and it is actually revealed that he was the one who killed Maya. He introduced himself as Nate St. Germain. But his actual name is Landon, and he was the one who killed Maya. He had met her at True North, had fallen in love with her. He was the guy that Maya had mentioned kind of on numerous times about this guy, and he kept calling and everything like that. And that was kind of how that happened. And Emily obviously kills him because he is going to try and kill her, or kill Paige and then her. All very dramatic, but obviously it makes sense why I have them so far down on this list. Murder. He was a literal killer, killed the love of her life, lied about who he was, just all kinds really. So that is obviously why he is number 10. He is the furthest thing from good partner material, and also Emily's gay. So it was just a shambles all round, really. Number 9, we have Emily and Ben. He actually gets off kind of lightly in the TV show because in the books, he's even worse than he is in the show. When he finds out about Emily and Maya in the books, he's awful.
What's wrong?
You surprised me.
We don't see him, thankfully, after episode 2, I think it is, episode 3. We are free of him, which is nice. He's not obviously as bad as a literal murderer, but he's also not far off. He tries to attack Emily and force himself on her. He's just a real piece of work. So that's why he is number 9. Also, they just didn't really seem to like gel that much anyway. In general, like the only thing that we really see that they have in common is that they are both on the swim team, I think. And that's pretty much it. At number 8, we have Emily and SARA Harvey, or as she is lovingly nicknamed, Shower Harvey.
Sarah, I was just...
She obviously then turned out to be evil and turn on them anyway, but even before that, before it turned out that, you know, she was involved, I just felt like they had a weird dynamic. They worked as like friends, but in terms of romantically, there was just never that spark there or that chemistry, and it all just always felt very awkward. Emily was weirdly protective over her, like when her friends like came to visit and she was like, oh no, like Sarah has plans, like she's gonna stay with us, she's not gonna stay with you, like I don't know. It all just got a bit weird there for a minute. So at number 7, you may think this doesn't count, and that's okay. But at number 7, I have Emily and Toby, because he obviously had a crush on her. They went to the dance together.
And I'll dance around you.
I think I'd rather drink the punch.
Okay.
And they were just really cute. Obviously, it turned out to just be friends, which is perfect. They make perfect little besties. But had that not been the case, they could have been cute together. If Emily obviously wasn't gay. They listened to the same music, they made each other little mixtapes. How adorable was that? Anyway, it's far more adorable than murder, so that's why Toby is this high up. Number 6, we have Emily and Talia. So Talia was introduced in season 5, I think. and she is the new chef at the brew, and obviously Emily works there as a barista at the time, and Emily kind of wanted a pay rise, so she was hoping to maybe get a bit more responsibility. Ezra brought Talia in and that kind of nipped that in the bud, so she didn't really like her at first when they first met, but they had a couple of sweet moments and she kind of like comes around, only to find out that Talia is married to some guy. Why do I think his name's Greg? I don't know, maybe it is, which obviously is not good. And also, you know, the age gap relationships continue. I feel like Ren, Ezra, you know, they get a lot of mentions, and quite a few more, but Talia rarely gets the mention, and she should, because she must have been old. Like, not old, but like old. She was married and she was also a professional chef, so she must have gone to culinary school, which puts her like probably around Ezra's age, maybe older. So it's all just a bit weird, and she basically kind of uses Emily, or not uses her, but kind of says that she's kind of like, I don't know, she's kind of like her way of like Talia's way of experimenting kind of, and she's like, oh yeah, Greg's fine with it, and like it's all just a bit weird, and paints a bit of a weird picture. They did make a kind of cute pairing, but you could tell there was that maturity difference. And yeah, the whole thing with her husband was weird. Like, maybe if it had been they just worked together and then in the time jump they met again and she had divorced from her husband and then they kind of were a thing, because obviously Emily would have been older. That could have been kind of cute because they did have pretty good chemistry, but in the way that it was all just a bit too weird. So breaking in to the top 5, we have Emily and Sabrina. So Sabrina, for me, just kind of lacks a little bit, and I thought maybe when I was first writing this, I was also rewatching Pretty Little Liars with my boyfriend because he'd never seen it, and I couldn't really remember Sabrina that much. So, you know, maybe I'm being a bit harsh putting her at number 5, like maybe I just don't really remember her. And then we got to her bits in the show and I was like, oh no, it's just because there's not really anything memorable about her, and that's not a dig. Like, the character herself is fine.
Maybe we could grab dinner sometime.
That's not necessary. I would have done it for anyone.
It's not just to say thank you.
Oh.
Obviously she kind of gives weed to Spencer and she has a bit more of a bigger role that I'd forgotten about, and then when we see her in the time jump, that's when her kind of thing with Emily happens. But Emily just kind of like lies to her the whole time and just kind of like dodges her, because she's got so much else going on, and they don't really have that many cute moments. Emily gets to kind of confide in her and she shows that she's obviously a nice person, but we kind of knew that anyway, so I don't think her relationship with Emily really brought anything else out of her character. But she seemed nice enough, like they didn't end in like a horrible way or she didn't do anything dodgy. So yeah, I feel like had they had more time to kind of explore that a bit more, maybe that could have been cool, but alas, no such joy. Then at number 4 I have Emily and Samara. So Samara is introduced in season 2, I think it's season 2.
They love you. I knew they would.
She is the leader of a LGBT group, I think, at a different school, and Emily reaches out to her online to talk to Paige and kind of as to be a kind of positive figure for Paige, who's struggling with coming out, right? And Paige doesn't show up, and so Emily has coffee with her and it kind of develops into this cute little relationship that ultimately is ruined by A. Tells Emily to give her number to Samara's friend, and that breaks them up and we don't see them again. Apparently Samara was meant to be a bigger love interest. You know what, maybe she's in season 1. I think she might be in season 1 actually. And then she was supposed to be a bigger love interest in season 2, but Claire Holt, who plays her, had to leave to be in the originals, which is Vampire Diaries spin-off. So she left for that, and she's really good in that. I haven't seen too much of the Vampire Diaries, I think I'm on season 3, but I really like her in it, so I feel like it was the good choice for her to leave Pretty Little Liars to go to Vampire Diaries. It also is a little bit of a shame because I feel like they were really cute together and they had a lot of potential, and she's kind of one of Emily's only relationships that has some kind of level of weirdness or like toxicness attached to it. And also I felt like the whole thing was a bit weird. Like, all I wanted was for Emily to give her friend the number. Like, she could have just given her the number and been like, oh, like, it was so nice to meet you, like, I feel like, you know, we would be good friends, and given her the number. Or like given the other girls the number. Like, I guess maybe that wouldn't have been what A would have wanted, but yeah. And then obviously they don't really talk about it again. Like, they just kind of end things. Whereas like Emily definitely could have been like, oh no, but like this is why, like I just thought we would be good friends. And it was all a bit weird, and it was all a bit of a weak ending. Kind of like Alex, Spencer's guy that she was with from season 1. He thinks that she applied to this school for him and ends things when actually A applied, but then that's it. Like, they don't speak again. Like, sometimes there's like times they write people out where I'm like, this just seems a bit ridiculous. Like, surely you could have like talked about this and worked it out, but whatever. At number 3, breaking into the top 3, I'm not sure if this is going to be more of a controversial one or not. So at number 3, I have Emily and Paige, and I don't know whether that is people think Paige should be higher, or people think Paige should be lower, but that is where I have her. I have her at number 3.
I don't want it to keep hurting.
Personally, I don't care for Paige. I don't like her character that much. I think she's definitely overhated. I think she is overhated. But I do have moments of Paige and Emily that I do enjoy, and I do think they had moments where they were sweet. But overall, I just feel like they just didn't have that chemistry. I don't know if that's because the actors didn't really have that kind of chemistry, but I just never truly felt it. And I think it made it hard for me to become invested in them. Paige is introduced in season 1, I believe, and she is very mean to Emily. She literally tries to drown her, lest we forget. I think that whole thing and her kind of... And then Paige's dad coming in and accusing Emily of only getting this spot on the team because she's gay, and, you know, all this stuff. Like, I get that Paige was going through a lot and she had homophobic parents, and then that kind of was pushed onto her, and then she didn't know how she felt because she was having like that internal battle. But she really takes it out on Emily, and Emily is very nice to her and like forgives her and everything. But I think it just kind of tainted their relationship for me, like the fact that she literally tried to drown her. And they always seem to be kind of butting heads a little bit, whether like over ALISON. Paige never seemed to really get over how she felt about ALISON. So especially when, you know, Ali came back and then she told the police that Ali was alive and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I just don't like her that much, I can't lie. But Emily obviously did and loved her and was with her for a long time. I feel like I couldn't have put her any lower than this because she is just with Emily for so much of the show that it wouldn't really make sense to put her below anyone else. I don't care for her character too much, but I do think she's overhated. And I do think that Paige and Emily had some sweet moments. If I had time, I could rack my brain and maybe think of some. They're okay. They're fun. I think in the time jump, Paige kind of had the chance to redeem herself and didn't. I think I mentioned this in another video, but she kind of falls victim to the Vanessa Abrams treatment. And if you've seen Gossip Girl, you know who Vanessa Abrams is. Vanessa comes into the show and is just like any other character, introduced like any other character, but people hate her. And people feel strongly about this, and very much so, that they hate Vanessa. She, I think, is one of the most hated TV show characters of all time. And I'd put Paige up there as well. And I think the writers saw that and towards the end used it. Because towards the end, Vanessa becomes even so much more like the villain. Well, as seen to be a villain, and all the things that people didn't like about her, they really like amped it up. And I think that's the same thing that happened with Paige, is that the writers saw that people didn't like Paige and they wanted people to ship ALISON and Emily because they were going to be endgame, so they made Paige worse. And the things that people didn't like about Paige, they amplified them, and so that people would be like, I don't want Emily to end up with Paige, she has to end up with Alison, even if Alison still isn't the right choice, right? So I think when she came back in the time jump, she hadn't really matured that much. She kind of seemed like she had, but then she hadn't, and she still was overly protective over Emily and wanted to be with her and hated Alison, and it was all the same thing again, which made me I just couldn't root for her when she came back as an actual serious contender to be with Emily. So at number 2, I have Emily and Alison. Emerson, it's a tricky one because I think it could have been really good, but it was just very not handled very well and just not well written.
Recent murder of Alison's mother, Jessica De Laurentiis.
And not only that, the police department...
It's kind of like, where do you sit on the fence of bullies to lovers storyline? Like, I feel like a different step from enemies to lovers, because they never hated each other. Like, but Emily was just treated so badly by Alison, made to feel like her having a crush on her was wrong, even though Alison would play into it when it worked for her, and that was weird, you know. But they kind of showed that they did have this closer bond, and when she comes back, you know, you do see it a bit more, and you kind of realize why Emily is as, you know, invested in Alison as she is. So I do think they had something there. And when they kissed in, I think it's Miss Me times 100, like the 100th episode, when they kissed, that had good chemistry. I thought that had good potential, and it kind of just doesn't go anywhere, you know. And then the time jump, they didn't have any kind of inkling really that they were going to get back together, or that they'd even spoken in the 5 years. And then for that whole thing to happen where Alison was going to have Emily's babies and brought them back together, but it didn't feel natural, and it didn't feel like a kind of fulfilling way for them to get back together, and that they really like loved each other. Alison proposes, and even that felt weird, you know, and it was fine, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like they did have a good potential. They had a good potential to redeem Alison and to make their relationship mean something, but it was just not written well. But I do think fundamentally she was the better choice over Paige, so that's why, like, I couldn't put her below Paige. And they do have some sweet moments, and I think Emily always brought out the best in Alison. That was evident from season 1, so I do like that aspect of their relationship as well. They're not my choice for Endgame, but they're also not the worst. I feel like Emily's is a bit of a bad bunch. Like, she's got some slim pickings here to choose from. Honestly, if Samara had come back post time jump, I feel like that would have been good. That would have been a good, like, Endgame. And then at number 1, I feel like it's pretty obvious. I feel like the top 3 with Emily is like obvious of who you're gonna have in there, because no one else like has been in it enough to make it to the top 3. But my number 1 pick for Emily is Maya. Emily and Maya are my number 1 pick. I loved them together, like, genuinely. And I did not feel that way about any of Emily's other love interests. None of them had the same chemistry as Emily and Maya.
I love you, Emily. I love you too, Maya.
She just adored her, and I thought their relationship was so sweet. And it had the sad element of, you know, Emily didn't feel like she would be accepted, and Maya gave her that confidence and helped her with that. When she got sent away, you know, they had that break, but then she came back, and that could have been so good. And I just thought it was so sad that they killed her off. I really did. And that scene when Emily finds out that she's dead is so heartbreaking. I cry that every time. With the same music as when she found out that Alison had died, and like, oh mate. And then to find out that she was just killed as well by, like, LYNDON, like, just by this guy who was obsessed with her. Like, not that it should have had something to do with A, but I feel like that would have had more impact act like that would have added more to the story, whereas like this way it feels like they just killed her off like for no reason when they had the best chemistry. I just love them together, I really do. And I wish that they hadn't killed her off, because she would have been the perfect end game for Emily. I love Maya. I had to have her at the top. And I think as well in the book, like their relationship is so much, you get to see it so much more. Like if you're a fan of Emily and Maya, you should definitely read the book. They are so sweet, and I think that gives her the edge for me even more, like makes me love her even more, because I love the book version of her. But yeah, so that is my entire ranking of Emily's love interests. Who would you have put at the top? Are you more of an Emily and Alison shipper, or a Paige and Emily shipper? I will see you guys in my next installment of this series, which is going to be Hannah's love interests. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.